He seemed so strong, so remarkably powerful, the Count went on, his voice warming and lulling. I only wondered if he possessed true sensitivity, as some men of great might, as you know, do not. For example, I wonder, is he capable of tears? Wesley would never cry, Buttercup answered, opening her chamber door, except for the death of a loved one. And with that, she closed the Count away, alone, went to her bed and knelt. Wesley, she thought then, do come, please. I have begged you in my thoughts now these many weeks, and still no word. Back when you were on the farm, I thought I loved you, but that was not love. When I saw your face behind the mask on the ravine floor, I thought I loved you, but again, nothing more than deep infatuation. Beloved, I think I love you now, and I pray you only give me the chance to spend my life in constant proving. I could spend my life in the fire swamp and sing from morn till night if you were by me. I could spend eternity sinking down through the snow sand if my hand held your hand. My preference would be to last eternity with you beside me on a cloud, but hell would also be a lark if Wesley was with me. She went on that way, silent hour after silent hour. She had done nothing else for 38 evenings now, and each time her ardor deepened. Her thoughts became more pure. Wesley, Wesley. Flying across the 7 seas to claim her. For his part, and quite without knowing, Wesley was spending his evenings in much the same fashion. After the torture was done, when the albino had finished tending his slashes or burns or breaks, when he was alone in the giant cage, he sent his brain to Buttercup, and there it dwelled. He understood her so well. In his mind, he realized the moment he left her on the farm was when she swore love. Certainly she meant it, but she was barely 18. What did she know of the depth of the heart? Then again, when he had removed his black mask and she had tumbled to him, the surprise had been operating, stunned astonishment as much as emotion. But just as he knew that sun was obliged to rise each morning in the east, no matter how much a western aerosol might have pleased it, so he knew Buttercup was obliged to spend her love on him. Gold was inviting, and so was royalty, but they could not match the fever in his heart, and sooner or later she would have to catch it. She had less choice than the sun. So when the Count appeared with the machine, Wesley was not particularly perturbed. As a matter of fact, he had no idea what the Count was bringing with him into the giant cage. As a matter of absolute fact, the Count was bringing nothing. It was the albino who was doing the actual work, making trip after trip with thing after thing. That was what it really looked like to Wesley, things. Little soft-rimmed cups of various sizes, and a wheel, most likely, and another object that could turn out to be either a lever or a stick. It was hard to tell. A good evening to you, the Count began. He had never, to Wesley's memory, shown such excitement. Wesley made a very weak nod in return. Actually, he felt about as well as ever, but it didn't do to let that kind of news get around. Feeling a bit under the weather, the Count asked. Wesley made another feeble nod. The albino scurried in and out, bringing more things, wire-like extensions, stringy and endless. That will be all, the Count said finally. Nod. Gone. This is the machine, the Count said when they were alone. I've spent 11 years constructing it. As you can tell, I'm rather excited and proud. Wesley managed an affirmative blink. I'll be putting it together for a while, and with that, he got busy. Wesley watched the construction with a good deal of interest and, logically enough, curiosity. You heard that scream a bit earlier on this evening. Another affirmative blink. That was a wild dog. This machine caused that sound. It was a very complex job the Count was doing, but the 6 fingers on his right hand never for a moment seemed in doubt as to just what to do. I'm very interested in pain, the Count said, as I'm sure you've gathered these past months. In an intellectual way, actually. I've written, of course, for the more learned journals on the subject. Articles, mostly. At the present, I'm engaged in writing a book. My book. The book, I hope. the definitive work on pain, at least as we know it now. Wesley found the whole thing fascinating. He made a little groan. I think pain is the most underrated emotion available to us, the Count said. The serpent, to my interpretation, was pain. Pain has been with us always, and it always irritates me when people say, as important as life and death, because the proper phrase to my mind should be, as important as pain and death. The Count fell silent for a time. Then, as he began and completed a series of complex adjustments, one of my theories, he said somewhat later, is that pain involves anticipation. Nothing original, I admit, but I am going to demonstrate to you what I mean. I will not, underline not, use the machine on you this evening. I could, it's ready and tested. But instead, I will simply erect it and leave it beside you for you to stare at the next 24 hours, wondering just what it is and how it works and how it can really be as dreadful as all that. He tightened some things here, loosened some more over there, tugged and patted and shaped. The machine looked so silly, Wesley was tempted to giggle. Instead, he groaned again. I'll leave you to your imagination then, the Count said, and he looked at Wesley. But I want you to know one thing before tomorrow night happens to you, and I mean it. You are the strongest, the most brilliant and brave, the most altogether worthy creature it has ever been my privilege to meet. And I feel almost sad that, for the purposes of my book and future pain scholars, I must destroy you. Thank you, Wesley breathed softly. The Count went to the cage door and said over his shoulder, and you can stop while you're performing about how weak and beaten you are. You haven't fooled me for a month. You're practically as strong now as on the day you entered the fire swamp. I know your secret, if that's any consolation to you. Secret? Hushed, strained. You've been taking your brain away, the Count cried. You haven't felt the least discomfort in all these months. You raise your eyes and drop your eyelids, and then you're off. Probably with, I don't know, her. Most likely. Good night now. Try and sleep. I doubt you'll be able to. Anticipation, remember? With a wave, he mounted the underground stairs. Wesley could feel the sudden pressure of his heart. Soon the albino came, knelt by Wesley's ear, and whispered, I've been watching you all these days. You deserve better than what's coming. I'm needed. No one else feeds the beasts as I do. I'm safe. They won't hurt me. I'll kill you if you'd like. That would foil them. I've got some good poison. I beg you, I've seen the machine. I was there when the wild dog screamed. Please let me kill you. You'll thank me, I swear. I must live. But they will not reach me. I am all right. I am fine. I am alive, and I will stay that way. He said the words loud, and he said them with passion. But for the first time in a long time, there was terror. Well, could you sleep? The Count asked the next night upon his arrival in the cage. Quite honestly, no, Wesley replied in his normal voice. I'm glad you're being honest with me. I'll be honest with you. No more charades between us, the Count said, putting down a number of notebooks and quill pens and ink bottles. I must carefully track your reactions, he explained. In the name of science? The Count nodded. If my experiments are valid, my name will last beyond my body. It's immortality I'm after, to be quite honest. He adjusted a few knobs on the machine. I suppose you're naturally curious as to how this works. I have spent the night pondering, and I know no more now than when I started. It appears to be a great conglomeration of soft-rimmed cups of infinitely varied sizes, together with a wheel and a dial and a lever, and what it does is beyond me. Also glue, added the Count, pointing to a small tub of thick stuff, to keep the cups attached. And with that, he set to work, taking cup after cup, touching the soft rims with glue, and setting them against Wesley's skin. Eventually, I'll have to put one over your tongue, too, the Count said, but I'll save that for last in case you have any questions. This certainly isn't the easiest thing to set up, is it? I'll be able to fix that in later models, the Count said. At least those are my present plans. And he kept right on putting cup after cup on Wesley's skin until every inch of exposed surface was covered. So much for the outside, the Count said. This next bit is more delicate. Try not to move. I am chained hand, head, and foot, Wesley said. How much movement do you think I'm capable of? Are you really as brave as you sound, or are you a little frightened? The truth, please. This is for posterity, remember. I'm a little frightened, Wesley replied. The Count jotted that down, along with the time. Then he got down to the fine work, and soon there were tiny soft rim cups on the insides of Wesley's nostrils, against his eardrums, under his eyelids, above and below his tongue, and before the Count arose, Wesley was covered inside and out with the things. Now all I do, the Count said very loudly, hoping Wesley could hear, is get the wheel going to its fastest spin so that I have more than enough power to operate, and the dial can be set from 1 to 20. And this being the first time, I will set it at the lowest setting, which is 1. And then all I need do is push the lever forward, and we should, if I haven't gummed it up, be in full operation. But Wesley, as the lever moved, took his brain away. And when the machine began, Wesley was stroking her autumn-colored hair and touching her skin of wintry cream, and then his world exploded, because the cups were everywhere, and before they had punished his body, but left his brain. Only not the machine. The machine reached everywhere. His eyes were not his to control, and his ears could not hear her gentle, loving whisper, and his brain slid away, slid far from love into the deep fault of despair, hit hard, fell again, down through the house of agony into the country of pain. Inside and out, Wesley's world was ripping apart, and he could do nothing but crack along with it. The Count turned off the machine then, and as he picked up his notebooks, he said, "As you no doubt know, the concept of the suction pump is centuries old. Well, basically, that's all this is, except instead of water, I'm sucking life. I've just sucked away 1 year of your life. Later, I'll set the dial higher, certainly to 2 or 3, perhaps even to 5. Theoretically, 5 should be 5 times more severe than what you've just endured. So please be specific in your answers. Tell me now, honestly, how do you feel?" In humiliation and suffering and frustration and anger and anguish so great it was dizzying, Wesley cried like a baby. "Interesting," said the Count, and carefully noted it down. It took Yellen a week to get his enforcers together in sufficient number, together with an adequate brute squad, and so, 5 days before the wedding, he stood at the head of his company, awaiting the speech of the prince. This was in the castle courtyard, and when the prince appeared, the Count was, as usual, with him. Although not as usual, the Count seemed preoccupied, which of course he was, though Yellen had no way of knowing that. The Count had sucked 10 years in Wesley this past week, and with the life of 65 that was average for a Florinese male, the victim had approximately 30 years remaining, assuming that he was about 25 when they started experimenting. But how best to go about dividing that? The Count was simply in a quandary. So many possibilities. But which would prove, scientifically, most interesting? The Count sighed. Life was never easy. "You are here," the prince began, "because there may be another plot against my beloved. I charge each and every one of you with being her personal protector. I want the thieves' quarter empty and all the inhabitants jailed 24 hours before my wedding. Only then will I rest easy. Gentlemen, I beg you, think of this mission as being an affair of the heart, and I know you will not fail." With that, he pivoted and followed by the Count, hurried from the courtyard, leaving Yellen in command. The conquest of the thieves' quarter began immediately. Yellen worked long and hard at it each day, but the thieves' quarter was a mile square, so there was much to do. Most of the criminals had been through unjust and illegal roundups before, so they offered little resistance. They knew the jails were not celled enough for all of them, so if it meant a few days' incarceration, what did it matter? There was, however, a second group of criminals, those who realized that capture meant, for various past performances, death. And these, without exception, resisted. In general, Yellen, through adroit handling of the brute squad, was able to bring these bad fellows eventually under control. Still, 36 hours before the sunset wedding, there were a half a dozen holdout left in the thieves' quarter. Yellen arose at dawn, and, tired and confused, not one of the captured criminals seemed to come from Gilder. He gathered the best of the brute squad and led them into the thieves' quarter for what simply had to be the final foray. Yellen went immediately to Falkbridge's alehouse, first sending all save 2 brutes off on various tasks, keeping a noisy one and with a quiet one for his own needs. He knocked on Falkbridge's door and waited. Falkbridge was by far the most powerful man in the thieves' quarter. He seemed almost to own half of it, and there wasn't a crime of any dimension he wasn't behind. He always avoided arrest, and everyone except Yellen thought Falkbridge must be bribing somebody. Yellen knew he was bribing somebody, since every month, rain or shine, Falkbridge came to Yellen's house and gave him a satchel full of money. "Who?" Falkbridge called from inside the alehouse. "The chief of all enforcement in Florence City, accompanied by the brutes." Yellen replied. Completeness was one of his virtues. "Oh!" Falkbridge opened the door. For a power, he was very unimposing, short and chubby. "Come in." Yellen entered, leaving the 2 brutes in the doorway. "Get ready and be quick," Yellen said. "Hey, Yellen, it's me," Falkbridge said softly. I know, Yellen said softly right back. "But please, do me a favor, get ready." "Pretend I did. I'll stay in the alehouse, I promise. I got enough food, no one will ever know." "The prince is without mercy," Yellen said. "If I let you stay and I'm found out, that's it for me." "I've been paying you 20 years to stay out of jail. You're a rich man, just so I don't have to go to jail. Where's the logic of me paying you and no advantages?" "I'll make it up to you. I'll get you the best cell in Florence City. Don't you trust me?" "How can I trust a man I paid 20 years to stay out of jail, when all of a sudden, the minute a little extra pressure's on, he says, 'Go to jail'? I'm not going." "You!" Yellen signaled to the noisy one. The brute started running forward. "Put this man in the wagon immediately," Yellen said. Falkbridge was starting to explain when the noisy one clubbed him across the neck. "Not so hard," Yellen cried. The noisy one picked up Falkbridge, tried dusting his clothes. "Is he alive?" Yellen asked. "See, I didn't know you wanted him breathing in the wagon. I thought you only wanted him in the wagon, breathing or not, so—" "Enough," Yellen interrupted, and upset he hurried out of the alehouse while the noisy one brought Falkbridge. "Is that everyone, then?" Yellen asked as various brutes were visible leaving the thieves' quarter, pulling various wagons. "I think there's still the fencer with the brandy," the noisy one began. "See, they tried getting him out yesterday, but I can't be bothered with a drunk. I'm an important man. Get him out of here, and do it now, both of you. Take the wagon with you, and be quick. This quarter must be locked and deserted by sundown, or the prince will be mad at me, and I don't like it much when the prince is mad at me." We're going, the noisy one replied. And he hurried off, letting the quiet one bring the wagon with Falkbridge inside. They tried getting this fencer yesterday, some of the standard enforcers, but it seems he has certain sword skills that made them wary. But I think I have a trick that will work. The quiet one hurried along behind, dragging the wagon. They rounded a corner, and from around another corner, just up ahead, a kind of drunken mumbling was starting to get louder. "I'm getting very bored, Vizzini," came out of sight. 3 months is a long time. Sorry. Holy cow. 3 months is a long time to wait, especially for a passionate Spaniard. Much louder now. "And I am a very passionate Vizzini, and you are nothing but a tardy Sicilian. So if you're not here in 90 more days, I'm done with you. You hear? Done." Much softer now. "I didn't mean that, Vizzini. I just love my filthy stoop. Take your time." The noisy brute slowed. That kind of talk goes on all day. Ignore it and keep the wagon out of sight. The quiet one pushed the wagon almost to the corner and stopped it. "Stay with the wagon," the noisy one added, and then whispered, "Here comes my trick." With that, he walked alone around the corner and stared ahead at the skinny fellow sitting, clutching the brandy bottle on the stoop. "Ho there, friend," the noisy one said. "I am not moving. Keep your ho there," he said the brandy drinker. "Hear me, though, please. I have been sent by Prince Humperdinck himself, who is in need of entertainment. Tomorrow is our country's 500th anniversary, and the dozen greatest tumblers and fencers and entertainers are there at this very moment competing. The finest pair will compete personally tomorrow for the new bride and groom. Now, as to why I'm here, yesterday some of my friends tried rousting you, and they said later that you resisted with some splendid sword work. So if you would like, I, at great personal sacrifice, will rush you to the fencing contest where, if you are as good as I am told, you might have yet the honor of entertaining the royal couple tomorrow. Do you think you could win such a competition? Breezing. Then hurry while there's still time to enter. The Spaniard managed to stand. He unsheathed his sword and flashed it a few times across the morning. The noisy one took a few steps backward and said, "No time to waste. Come along now." The drunk started yelling, "I'm waiting for Vizzini." Meanie. "I'm not mean. I'm just following the rule." Cruel. "Not cruel, not mean. Can't you understand? And here his voice trailed off for a moment, and he squinted. And then quietly he said, "Fezzik?" From behind the noisy one, the quiet one said, "Who says it?" Inigo took a step from his stoop, trying desperately to make his eyes focus through the brandy. "Fezzik? Is that a joke you made?" The quiet one said, "Played." Inigo gave a cry and started staggering forward. "Fezzik, it's you! True!" And he reached out, grabbed Inigo just before he stumbled, and brought him back to an upright position. "Hold him just like that," the noisy brute said. And he moved in quickly, right arm raised as he had done to Falkbridge. Splat! Fezzik dumped the noisy brute into the wagon beside Falkbridge, covered them both with a soiled blanket, and hurried back to Inigo, whom he had left leaning propped against a building. "It's just so good to see you," Fezzik said then. "Oh, it is, but—" Inigo's voice was winding steadily down now. "I am too weak for surprises," were the last sounds he got out before he fainted, from fatigue and brandy and no food and bad sleep and lots of other things, none of them nutritious. Fezzik hoisted him up with one arm, took the wagon in the other, and hurried back to Falkbridge's house. He carried Inigo inside, placed him upstairs on Falkbridge's feather bed, then hurried away to the entrance of the thieves' quarter, dragging the wagon behind him. He made very sure that the dirty blanket covered both of the victims, and outside the entrance, the brute squad held a boot count of those they had removed. The total came out right, and by 11 in the morning, the great walled thieves' quarter was officially emptied and padlocked. Released from active duty, Fezzik followed the wall around to a quiet place and waited. He was alone. Walls were never any problem for him, not so long as his arms worked, and he quickly scaled this one and hurried back through the quiet streets to Falkbridge's house. He made some tea, carried it upstairs, force-fed Inigo. Within a few moments, Inigo was blinking under his own power. "It's just so good to see you," Fezzik said then. "Oh, it is, Inigo agreed. "And I'm sorry for fainting, but I have done nothing for 90 days but wait for Vizzini and drink brandy. And a surprise like seeing you, well, that was just too much for me on an empty stomach, but I'm fine now." "Good," Fezzik said. "Vizzini is dead." "He is, eh? Dead, you say, Viz—" And then he fainted again. Fezzik began berating himself. "Oh, you stupid. If there's a right way and a wrong way, trust you to find the dumb way. Fool, fool. Back to the beginning was the rule." Fezzik really felt idiotic then, because after months of forgetting, now that he didn't need to remember anymore, he remembered. He hurried downstairs and made some tea and brought some crackers and honey and fed Inigo again. When Inigo blinked, Fezzik said, "Rest." "Thank you, my friend. No more fainting." And he closed his eyes and slept for an hour. Fezzik busied himself in Falkbridge's kitchen. He really didn't know how to prepare a proper meal, but he could heat and he could cool and he could sniff the good meat from the rotted. So it wasn't too great a task to finally end up with something that once looked like a roast beef and another thing that could have been a potato. The unexpected smell of hot food brought Inigo around, and he laid in bed, eating every bite Fezzik fed him. I never realized I was in such terrible condition, Inigo said, chewing away. Shh, you'll be fine now, Fezzik said, cutting another piece of meat, putting it into Inigo's mouth. Inigo chewed it carefully down. First you appear so suddenly, then on top of that the business of Vizzini, it was too much for me. It would have been too much for anybody. Just rest. Fezzik began to cut another piece of meat. I feel such a baby, so helpless, Inigo said, taking the next bite, chewing away. You'll be as strong as ever by sundown, Fezzik promised, getting the next piece of meat ready. The six-fingered man is named Count Rugen, and he's here right now in Florence City. Interesting, Inigo managed this time before he fainted again. Fezzik stood over the still figure. Well, it is so good to see you, he said, and it's been such a long time, and I've just got so much news. Inigo only lay there. Fezzik hurried to Falkbridge's tub and plugged it up, and after a lot of work, he got it filled with steaming water. And then he dunked Inigo in, holding him down with one hand, holding Inigo's mouth shut with the other, and when the brandy began to sweat from the Spaniard's body, Fezzik emptied the tub and filled it again with icy water this time, and back he plunged Inigo, and when that water began to warm up a bit back, he filled the tub with the steaming stuff, and back went in Inigo, and now the brandy was really oozing from his pores. And that was how it went, hour after hour, hot to icy cold, to steaming hot, then some tea, then some toast, then some steaming hot again, and more icy cold, then a nap, and then more toast and less tea, but the longest steamer yet, and this time there wasn't much brandy left inside, and one final icy cold, and then a 2-hour sleep until, by mid-afternoon, they sat downstairs in Falkbridge's kitchen. And now, at last, for the first time in 90 days, Inigo's eyes were almost bright. His hands did shake, but not all that noticeably, and perhaps the Inigo of before the brandy would have bested this fellow now in 60 minutes of solid fencing. But not too many other masters in the world would have survived for 5. Tell me briefly now. While I've been here with the brandy, you have been where? Well, I spent some time in a fishing village, and then I wandered a bit. And then a few weeks ago, I found myself in Gilder, and the talk there was of the coming wedding and perhaps a coming war. And I remember Buttercup when I carried her up the cliffs of Insanity. She was so pretty and soft, and I had never been so near perfume before that I thought it might be nice to see her wedding celebrations, so I came here. But my money was gone, and then they were forming a brute squad and needed giants, and I went to apply, and they beat me with clubs to see if I was strong enough, and when the clubs broke, they decided I was. I've been a brute, first class, all this past week. It's very good pay. Inigo nodded. All right. Again, this time, please be brief from the beginning. The man in black, did he get by you? Yes, fairly too. Strength against strength. I was too slow and out of practice. Then it was he that killed Vizzini? That is my belief. Did he use his sword or his strength? Fezzik tried to remember. There weren't any swords or wounds, and Vizzini didn't seem broken. There were just these 2 goblets, and Vizzini dead. Poison is my guess. Why would Vizzini take poison? Fezzik hadn't the least idea. But he was definitely dead. Fezzik was positive. Inigo began to pace the kitchen, his movements quick and sharp, the way his movements were before. All right, Vizzini is dead. Enough of that. Tell me briefly where this 6-fingered Rugen is so I may kill him. That may not be so easy, Inigo, because the Count is with the Prince, and the Prince is in his castle, and he is pledged not to leave it till after his wedding, for he fears another sneak attack from Gilder, and all the entrances but the main one are sealed for safety, and the main doors are guarded by 20 men, Inigo said, pacing faster now. If you fought 5 and I fenced 5, that would mean 10 gone, which would be bad because that would also mean 10 left, and they would kill us. But, and now he picked up his pace even more, if you should take 6 and I took 8, that would mean 14 beaten, which would not be as bad, but still bad enough since the 6 remaining would kill us. And now he whirled on Fezzik. How many could you handle at most? Well, some of them are from the brute squad, so I don't think more than 8. Leaving me 12, which is not impossible, but not the best way to spend your first evening after 3 months on brandy. And suddenly Inigo's body sagged, and in his eyes, bright a moment ago, now there was moisture. What has happened? Fezzik cried. Oh, my friend, I need Vizzini. I am not a planner. I follow. Tell me what to do, and no man alive does it better. But my mind is like fine wine. It travels badly. I go from thought to thought, but not with logic, and I forget things. And help me, Fezzik, what am I to do? Fezzik wanted to cry now, too. I am the stupidest fellow that ever was born. You know that. I couldn't remember to come back here even after you made up that special lovely rhyme for me. I need Vizzini, but Vizzini is dead. And then Inigo was up again, blazing about the kitchen, and for the first time his fingers were snapping with excitement. I don't need Vizzini, I need his master. I need the man in black. Look, he bested me with the steel. My greatness, he bested you with strength, yours. He must have outplanned and outthought Vizzini, and he will tell me how to break through the castle and kill the 6-fingered beast. If you have the least notion where the man in black is at this moment, relate quickly the answer. He sails the 7 seas with the dread pirate Roberts. Why would he do a thing like that? Because he is a sailor for the dread pirate Roberts. A sailor, a common ordinary seaman, best the great Inigo Montoya with the sword? Inconceivable. He must be the dread pirate Roberts. Otherwise it makes no sense. In any event, he is sailing far away. Count Rugen says so, and the prince himself gave the order. The prince wants no pirates around. What with all the trouble he's having with Gilder, remember, they kidnapped the princess once. They might try. Fezzik, we kidnapped the princess once. You never were strong on memory, but even you should recall that we put the Gilder uniform pieces under the princess's saddle. Vizzini did it because he was under orders to do it. Someone wanted Gilder to look guilty, and who but a noble would want that? And what noble more than the war-loving prince himself? We never knew who hired Vizzini. I guess Humperdinck. And as for the Count's word on the man in the black's whereabouts, since the Count is the same man who slaughtered my father, we can rest assured that he is certainly a terrific fellow. He started for the door. Come, we have much to do. Fezzik followed him through the darkening streets of the thieves' quarter. You'll explain things to me as we go along? Fezzik asked. I'll explain them to you now. His blade-like body knifed through the quiet streets, Fezzik hurrying alongside. A. I need to reach Count Rugen to at last avenge my father. B. I cannot plan on how to reach Count Rugen. C. Vizzini would have planned it for me, but C. Prime Vizzini is unavailable. However, D. The man in black outplanned Vizzini, so therefore E. The man in black can get me to Count Rugen. But I told you Prince Humperdinck, after he captured him, gave orders for all to hear that the man in black was to be returned safely to his ship. Everyone in Florence knows this to be so. A. Prince Humperdinck had some plans to kill his fiancée and hired us to carry them out. But B. The man in black ruined Prince Humperdinck's plans. However, eventually, C. Prince Humperdinck managed to capture the man in black, and as everybody in all Florence City knows, Prince Humperdinck has a terrible temper. So therefore, D, if a man has a terrible temper, what could be more fun than losing it against the very fellow who spoiled your plans to kill your fiancée? They had reached the thieves' quarter wall now. They had reached the thieves' quarter wall now. Inigo jumped on Fezzik's shoulders, and Fezzik started to climb. Conclusion. 1. Inigo continued, not missing a beat. Since the prince is in Florence City taking out his temper on the man in black must also be in Florence City. Conclusion 2. The man in black must not be too happy with his present situation. Conclusion 3. I am in Florence City and need a planner to avenge my father, while he is in Florence City and needs a rescuer to salvage his future. And when people have equal needs of each other, conclusion 4 and final, deals are made. Fezzik reached the top of the wall and started carefully climbing down the other side. I understand everything, he said. You understand nothing, but it really doesn't matter, since what you mean is you're glad to see me just as I am glad to see you, because no more loneliness. That's what I mean, said Fezzik. It was dusk when they began their search blindly through all of Florence City. Dusk, a day before the wedding. Count Rugen was about to begin his nightly experiments at that dusk, gathering up his notebooks from his room, filled with all his jottings. 5 levels underground, behind high castle walls, locked and chained and silent, Wesley waited beside the machine. In a way, he still looked like Wesley, except, of course, that he had been broken. 20 years of his life had been sucked away. 20 were left. Pain was anticipation. Soon the Count would come again. Against any wishes he had left, when Wesley went on crying. It was dusk when Buttercup went to see the prince. She knocked loudly, waited, knocked again. She could hear him shouting inside, and if it had not been something so important, she would never have knocked a 3rd time. But she did, and the door was yanked open, and the look of anger on his face immediately changed to the sweetest smile. Beloved, he said, come in. A moment more is all I need. And he turned back to Yellen. Look at her, Yellen, my bride-to-be. Has any man ever been so blessed? Yellen shook his head. Am I wrong? Do you think to go to any lengths, then, to protect her? Yellen shook his head again. The prince was driving him crazy with his stories of the Gilder infiltration. Yellen had every spy he'd ever used working day and night, and not one of them had come up with anything about Gilder. And yet the prince insisted. Inwardly, Yellen sighed. It was beyond him. He was simply an enforcer, not a prince, and in fact, the only remotely disturbing news he'd heard since he'd closed the thieves' quarter that morning was within the hour when someone told him of a rumor that the ship of the dread pirate Roberts had perhaps been seen sailing all the way into Florence Channel itself. But such a thing, Yellen knew from long experience, was simply rumor. I'll tell you, they are everywhere, these Gilders, the prince went on, and since you seem unable to stop them, I wish to change some plans. All the gates have been sealed to my castle except the front one, yes? Yes, and 20 men guard it. Add 80 more. I want 100 men. Clear? 100 men it will be, every brute available. Inside the castle, I am quite safe. I have my own supplies, food, stables, enough. As long as they cannot get at me, I will survive. These, then, are the new and final plans. Jot them down. All 500th anniversary arrangements are canceled until after the wedding. The wedding is tomorrow at sunset. My bride and I will ride my whites to Florence Channel, surrounded by all your enforcers. There we will board a ship and begin our long-awaited honeymoon, surrounded by every ship in the Florin Armada. Every ship but 4, Buttercup corrected. He blinked at her a moment in silence. Then he said, blowing her a kiss, but discreetly, so Yellen couldn't see, yes, yes, how forgetful I am. Every ship but 4. He turned back to Yellen. But in his blink, in that following silence, Buttercup had seen it all. Those ships will stay with us until I deem it safe to release them. Of course, Gilder could attack then, but that is a chance we must risk. Let me think if there's anything else. The prince loved giving orders, especially the kind that he knew would never need carrying out. Also, Yellen was a slow jotter, and that only added to the fun. Excused, the prince said finally. With a bow, Yellen was gone. The 4 ships were never sent, Buttercup said when they were alone. Don't bother lying to me any more. Whatever was done for your own good, Sweet Pudding. Somehow I do not think so. You're nervous. I'm nervous. We're getting married tomorrow. We've got a right to be. You couldn't be more wrong, you know. I'm very calm. And in truth, she did seem that way. It doesn't matter whether you sent the ships or not. Wesley will come for me. There is a God, I know that, and there is love, and I know that too. So Wesley will save me. You're a silly girl. Now go to your room. Yes, I am a silly girl, and yes, again, I will go to my room. And you're a coward with a heart filled with nothing but fear. The prince had to laugh. The greatest hunter in the world, and you say I am a coward? I do. I do indeed. I'm getting much smarter as I age. I say you are a coward, and you are. I think you hunt only to reassure yourself that you are not what you are, the weakest thing to ever walk the earth. He will come for me, and then we will be gone, and you will be helpless for all your hunting, because Wesley and I are joined by the bond of love, and you cannot track that, not with 1,000 bloodhounds, and you cannot break it, not with 1,000 swords. Humperdinck screamed towards her then, ripping at her autumn hair, yanking her from her feet and down the long curving corridor to her room, where he tore that door open and threw her inside and locked her there and started running for the underground entrance to the Zoo of Death.